Hello everyone, I'm Josh from Zoek, the fastest growing global job board. Joining me today is David Brown Jr., the Managing Director of Browns Distribution Services Ltd and proprietor of PalletOnline. Browns Distribution is a family-grown and owned business based in Stoke-on-Trent, providing services such as pallet distribution, warehousing and general road haulage, with many years of experience and over 100 staff. Browns leads the sector in providing the highest quality of UK and international logistics solutions. In the last 3 years, David has secured sustainable growth with increased turnover, improved profitability, while reducing waste and maximising business efficiencies. In this interview, I'm going to be finding out more about David's rise through the company, becoming the proprietor and director of sister business PalletOnline, and delving into what he's learned and experienced in his career in business development. Thank you very much for joining me today. We'll start off with a nice, easy one. Could you just tell us a little bit about how your career began?
For me, I unknowingly enrolled into the family business from quite a young age, actually. I suppose even growing up, being around the dinner table, listening to family discussions, coming into work, into the business at weekends and before school and after school, it was always very much part of what I was and what I did. So through school, I was always involved in the business in some elements. I was really keen to get more involved and I just wanted to work actually and be on my own 2 feet as best as I could. So after I finished my GCSEs, I jumped straight into the business, and I'd always been quite a cognitive person. I'd always liked working with my hands, being outdoors, vehicle workshop. So, technician, mechanics, environment always interested me. So my first role was working in the vehicle workshop. So I did my apprenticeship in there, learned all about servicing vehicles, defect management. Lots of hours were involved, early mornings, late finishes, and that's just the nature of the environment that I was working in. So I did that for a couple of years, and I realised I'd come straight from GCSEs, and I thought education is vital if I want to continue forward. On a business management course, I did that part-time in the evenings, in between working at the business, Browns, and learned some really valuable skills, which I'm still relying on to these days, quite a few years later. So once I'd completed the course, for me, it was very much just about continuing to work around the business in all areas. So from workshop, I went into warehouse. From warehouse, I went into night shift on the warehouse, into driving class 2, class 1 vehicles. So I acquired my licenses on that front. And then ended up in the office environment, which wasn't my first calling. I'd much prefer being outside. So once I'd hit the office, it was very much then just exactly the same process again, but moving through the ranks internally, out of the cold weather, admittedly, which was nice. Supervisor into management roles. From management roles, I became a director of the business. And then in 2011, I was appointed the managing director.
Okay, brilliant. Wow. So this next question sort of is probably might be a little bit of overlap there, but when you sort of went to go and study at university, was it always with that ambition of managing in the family business?
To be honest, it wasn't. My main ambition was just to increase my skill set, equip myself with more management, leadership skills. I'd always enjoyed learning and reading books. So it was more of a natural stepping stone for me, more than setting out a direction of I want to be the MD. That was never when I went to university my ultimate intention. It was just to equip myself with more information. That obviously then led me to being the MD where I am now.
So what would you say has been your biggest challenge in your time working in the business?
Oh, I would say most businesses will face this one, and it's a culture. It's a challenge of culture. So businesses that are progressive and moving forward and has aspirations with new technological advances, recruitment is always difficult, and culture plays a huge part of any business. It's in the fabric of what that business is about. So we never had a negative culture, but we always wanted to have the best culture, be better at everything that we do. So as part of pulling together the teams around us, we've always had a very strong focus, and our own beliefs and ethos is around a positive culture environment. So that's an ongoing challenge in our business, and I think in a lot of businesses.
You have got such a wide range of specialties. You talked about how you started out sort of in the workshop and sort of built yourself up, and then went to university and sort of did that more sort of academic route and upskilled various areas. How important is it to sort of have that sort of overarching coverage over so many different areas in business? Overarching coverage over so many different areas in business.
So for me, I think it's an essential part of what I do. It's equipped me with an awful lot of experience in a lot of different ways. Now, one thing that I'm very acutely aware of is that that's a great strength, but it can also be a negative asset, in the sense that you could quite easily fall into a trap of micromanaging people, micromanaging departments, because you've been in that environment, you've done it, and you've found a different solution. I'm a big believer in what I do of empowering people and giving those people the tools to make their own decisions quickly, informatively. And if mistakes are made, then we learn from those mistakes and we retrain and re-educate. So yes, I'd say it's essential to have an overview of a lot of the different areas, but you've got to be careful not to micromanage. So I'm very aware of that myself.
Okay, yeah, no, great answer. What would you say is your biggest motivator?
This one's going to sound funny, but I would say my biggest motivator is just doing a good job for customers. We are in an immensely difficult industry. We know that. We have a very broad customer base in a lot of different industries, a lot of different manufacturing type industries, for instance. So a very multi-leveled, faceted process for different customers. And we always feel as though in our trade, it's a huge challenge. So for us to do a good job at the start of the week on a Monday morning at 4 a.m. when we start delivering our first loads, to close that week off, and we've got through it, we've done a great job for customers, we've hit the KPIs, we've hit the targets, knowing that we've been up against it all week because of, road conditions, traffic, issues down the road, then that's a big motivator for us. So happy staff, it is a tough environment. So if we're all getting on, having a good laugh at the same time, hitting those KPIs, that's a great motivator.
And obviously it's, especially in a year like this year where things are changing every month, it's difficult to look too far ahead. But what changes do you see with the business within the next 5 years?
Technology at the moment is a big one in not just our business, Browns Distribution, but in the industry. We feel as though we've always been at the forefront of technology. It's a big part of who we are. We ensure we've got the best systems in place to give our customers the best service and best information. So for us, the next 5 years is very much embarking continually on the technological advances that we're able to. We also see the industry consolidating as well. There are a lot of different companies out there, quite large players, some much bigger than Browns, which are consolidating on themselves. What that will look like afterwards, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, so we see technology consolidation between hauliers and pallet networks being something to keep an eye out for.
So this one's sort of more about for our job seekers to get an insight into what sort of hiring managers look for. So when you're recruiting for new employees or choosing a staff member for a promotion, what do you look for in them to help you make that decision?
Sure. So the big one for us, it goes back to the culture question earlier on, is we need to find people that have similar beliefs as our own. And that's a big one for us. Now, we're not going to understand that until we get to do a face-to-face interview, or whether it be a Zoom interview or anything. Yeah. But we look for similar beliefs, transferable skills. We do look for people that have an appetite for growth. And a big one for us is strong attention to detail. Without attention to detail in our business, we can soon get tripped up with the driver instructions and whatnot. So those are what's really important to us.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to get into a career in the warehouse and distribution industry?
Attitude. You have got to work hard. As I mentioned before, when I was coming through the ranks, a lot of it is outside working. It is hard work, but it's very well rewarded at the same time. We look for some people that have scope for growth as well. That's important to us. People that want to come through the ranks and learn new skills and progress through the business. Some of our most successful members of staff are people that have started in administration departments doing very basic tasks, and they've come right the way through our business, and they're in very much more senior dedicated positions at the moment.
Now we're moving on to a little bit to do with coronavirus. How has Browns been affected by coronavirus and more recently by the second lockdown?
Yeah, the second lockdown was easier to manage because we'd been through it before. So we'd learned a lot of lessons from the first time round and set up a lot of new technology back in March. And the first lockdown was very challenging for us. We were incredibly busy. And the staff in our business did a tremendous job. We had a huge increase in work, supplier demand scenario in terms of the supply chain, food, goods, pet food, and any products like that we were moving an awful lot of. We reacted positively, we stepped up, we were very proud of what we did. We put a lot of systems in place. We had a lot of technology already existent in the business, which would allow us to work remotely. Phones, computers, laptops, people didn't need to come in if they didn't have to. Our business is very much though that we do need to be on site. Obviously the drivers, the warehouse, answering telephone calls in that environment. So we just had to spread out in our business, took a lot of advice on .gov and how to do all of these things, and we executed it quite well. The second lockdown, it honestly hasn't had any change in our behaviour. We've still carried on those policies from the first time round, and they're on as stringent as the first time round, which means that we're still dealing with raw material, with construction. They haven't closed down. So we're still incredibly busy, actually. Albeit the drivers have really had to step their game up in their safety side, obviously wearing face coverings, extra cleaning, and all of that. So we were used to it. But yeah, it was a big challenge for us in February and March when we had to make these changes. It was not easy.
Yeah.
We've had some positives from the changes, in actual fact. One example that springs to mind is paperwork. The parcel industry were able to get rid of paperwork many years ago. The pallet industry and what we do has been quite heavily paper-filled. And that's because we're delivering such large volumes of freight. We have to have documentation of what are on those vehicles. One of the things that we did when COVID was affecting businesses, we removed as much paperwork out of the business that we could. And we have no intentions of reintroducing that level of paperwork. And it was always an objective of ours to look at it as a reducing aspect. So, one of the changes there is I think that's going to be a big change for the hoarded industry to move to that technology side, sign on glass aspect, and get to where those parcel guys have been for quite a few years.
This is actually the last question, but it's a little fun one.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of asking you, do you have a saying or a motto that describes your approach to business?
I think I have a saying or a motto, but something that I will always think quietly of in my own mind. If I'm having a day where perhaps I'm not as motivated or I want to put something off, I always believe don't put something off today that we can do today. Let's get it done now. So don't put off something till tomorrow that we can do today. And that's just something that resonates with me in my own mind.
That concludes this episode. Thank you very much to David for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. Remember, you can check out our other guest interviews on our YouTube channel or via our info hub at zoek.uk. We'll see you next time for another exciting addition to our guest interview series.